let's start there. How are these virtual? What do you think of these virtual open houses? How did like effective, fun? I mean, are people? Is it kind of a fun way for them to connect and see the stuff that you have on?
Yeah, so I think just recently it's kind of picked up quite a bit. So we started doing them right after the open house when we couldn't do them anymore. We're kind of thinking, well, what are we going to do to, get people in? And so we started doing them, but
Yeah.
but the MLS wasn't supporting them, right? So we were just having to do our own marketing for them, and we'd have, 5 to maybe 8 people pop in, and of course, we use the Instagram Live platform. But now that the MLS
Yeah.
is starting to schedule them out, they're actually, we got quite a few yesterday. We held one at Fifth and Madison. Can you hear me okay, Jeff?
Oh, good.
Yeah, can you
Yeah,
hear
yeah,
me
I got
okay?
you fine.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the
Yeah.
one yesterday, you could actually put in, either Instagram, or you could do Facebook, or you can do YouTube Live. There's a whole bunch of different platforms,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then just schedule it out. It just seems to be working.
It's kind of becoming the norm. I mean, like for now, it's the only safe way that we can do it and still get lots of people to see, the interiors and kind of see what we're up to. So,
Yeah.
it's kind of like, it seems silly not to try it, right? I'm kind of excited to try YouTube Live. I haven't done that yet, but that's where I do a lot of my video stuff. And so I feel like if they are building something maybe natively that can work, where you can, I think you can, where you can do, YouTube and then also use some of the other platforms, I think that would be kind of fun, kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I think that they'll gain momentum as more agents start using it and get comfortable with it and stuff. And it's good for buyers not to have to leave their home and go out and just kind of see what the space looks
Yeah.
like.
So what do you think of
Nice.
this crazy market?
I know it's been very interesting, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I feel like every week, though, things start to pick up and it gets a little bit, I guess, busier. It was really strange when everything kind of first came to a head and just kind of thinking, well, what are we going to do at this point? And then every single week, like I said, has gotten a little bit busier and people are kind of getting out there now. How about for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, let me see, I was just gonna, sorry. No, I mean, I think in a nutshell,
Flip it back around, maybe.
let me try this here. I was going to do this real quick.
Morning, Roy.
Trying to give Roy a little love. Okay. Oh, oops. And I ended up showing him my computer screen. There you go, Roy. How about that? So anyway, no, I think this market is surprising is the word I would use, right? I think I would probably be able to speak for both of us where it's like, you're obviously thinking about everybody affected with COVID, right? And the safety, therefore, for ourselves and the people that we work for.
Yeah.
And I don't think anything, I mentioned this in the blog recently, was like, I don't think our work for a 60-day period is more important than everyone's safety, right? So like I've been cautious, like I'm working, but like trying not to be overexposed or overexpose anybody else. But I think it's surprising because there's way more pendings over actives and not necessarily just in not necessarily our downtown market, right? But elsewhere, like Greater Seattle, the East Side, everything is moving so quickly.
Yeah.
And I think I was a little bit surprised. I mean, I don't know about everybody else, but when I started seeing consistently some of these, 750 to a couple $1,000,000 Greater Seattle trade in the first 5 or 6 days of going on market, it was like, whoa, I mean, this is similar to what we had before COVID, right? And then it just kind of feels like it's still really fluid and active and competitive. And so, I'm surprised by that. I think I didn't expect any like major price declines, or I still don't think our economy in any way, shape, or form is going to free fall. I think we have like a really healthy rebound, especially the second half of the year.
Yep.
But I don't know. I was really kind of surprised at how actively things had been selling and still are.
Well, it kind of felt like
What about you?
before COVID, it kind of felt like it was 2017 again, right? 16,
Yeah.
17, like with all the bidding wars, because we did have kind of a little bit of a lax, and 18 and 19, it felt.
Yeah.
And I guess sometimes you have to take into account single family homes versus condos because they're kind of two completely different beasts, and
You're,
they don't mimic each other really. It's funny because condos, I think, also have a little bit of a spin-off of feeding off of the rental market a little bit.
right. Right.
So depending on what the rental market is, the condo market is doing X or Y, right? So it kind of
Yeah.
just moves. And then the single family market, though, seems to be, I guess, pretty consistent over, the last 5+ years. But it's
Yeah.
been ripping and roaring.
So explain that a little bit so everyone can kind of understand that, like from a high level, you have apartment supply, right? And then you
Yep.
have our condo supply downtown. And
Mm-hmm.
you happen to follow, we both actually, are obviously really active in the condo market, but you do a little bit more on the apartment side. So what does give me kind of the broad overview of like how that apartment market's affecting our market right now. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think before typically, so when a market for apartments is really tight and the rental rates obviously are very high, people start thinking, well,
Yeah.
I think it's time that I purchase, right? And so we saw that happening when rental rates were starting to increase, probably in that 2013, 14, 15 timeframe. A lot of renters were kind of jumping into the market at that point because rental rates were getting higher, and it made more sense to jump in and purchase. Well,
Yeah.
now we've kind of leveled off to where the values of owning and what you're paying per month, financially versus renting, you actually have a better deal when you're renting. And we
Hmm.
saw that really in 2018 and 19, even though rental rates were they were still all-time highs, so were values really. And so, but it really didn't create kind of the urgency for renters to kind of jump
Yeah. Well, and
and back.
and
Okay.
then yeah, I got you.
Some sort
Yeah.
of ownerships.
Yeah. And then of
Um,
course,
so sorry, go ahead.
no, you're good. You're good.
Okay, I cut out. So anyway, so I think that when the rental market right now, there is a lot of vacancy downtown in the apartment buildings. However, it feels, and they're offering like, 1 month, 2 month free on different, rentals that they have. I feel though like the private condo rental market is extremely tight. Like just this last week, we listed, 3 new places and all of them have applications on them.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
granted, be it Insignia, so one of the nicer apartment buildings downtown or condo buildings, but people look for those amenities and what have you, and are jumping on because there's not a lot of inventory.
Yeah, yeah, and you know what? In my experience over the years, and we've worked on some of this stuff when I'd send you clients or folks that needed to rent their condos. It's interesting from a renter's perspective. Quite a few of the people that I know that end up in a condo, they kind of want to rent from a human being, versus like these big institutional kind of apartment property managers. And there's something different about literally having one point of contact, with the owner. And should something happen in the unit, you have this person that you can call versus kind of this big, kind
Yeah.
of rental conglomerate or whatever. So yeah, it's interesting. There always seems to be a fair bit of demand from like our professional clients too that kind of want that, higher touch, less institutionalized kind of experience, I
Yep.
guess, right?
You
Yeah.
also get, your utilities included in most places. You get your storage or parking. So again, they end up being a little bit more of a deal too sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Well, and so we're still got a number of condo projects that are selling, right? New
Yep.
construction. You actually, for anyone that didn't get to see it, you kind of hosted a little forum with some of our new construction towers in town, and it was kind of fun to hear from those guys and what they're doing and what they're offering and how much inventory they have left. But
Yeah.
I'm sure you would agree with me that before COVID, it certainly looked like we were going to be on an uptrend for new deliveries, and some of these Canadian developers and others are certainly acquiring sites and kind of getting ready to develop, right?
Yeah.
Or were, and that probably doesn't change, right? But this COVID thing, we talked about this the other day. It's kind of interesting. It'll be fascinating to see how consumers perceive this change, right? With spatial
Yep.
awareness and kind of having a little bit more social distancing, right? And
Yep.
how that might affect what these developers are doing amenity wise. And I mean, sounds kind of dorky, but it's like, it's interesting to think about, like, 4 or 5 years, will our amenity space look differently? Will these developers have to do something? And maybe not, because right now they're pretty communal, where you can create some space from each other anyway. But it'll be interesting to see how that all shakes out.
Yep. Well, I think the amenity spaces, I mean, for example, like over at Nexus, right?
Hmm.
I think that's a good example of gorgeous amenity spaces on the top level of the building, and then you have, the co-working spaces and everything kind of, midway through the building. And I just think that people do use those amenities. And when the square footage of the actual home gets a lot smaller, those amenities become more important too.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
totally agree. Yeah, and that, we see that at Nexus, and where you get all these incredible amenity space, and you get that big, beautiful rooftop deck. And I know at Insignia, and you're well aware of this because you worked in the building often. Like, that's one of the reasons why a lot of people go there. Is for
yeah.
for the rooftop deck, and
And
to
the
have
pool.
that, yeah, have that pool and that huge
Yeah.
fitness facility.
Yeah.
And I do agree with you. I think if you are on a budget, or maybe you're kind of a younger professional and you want to do something, and buy your first place. I mean, you can buy a studio, or you can buy a smaller unit, and then totally take advantage of what everyone else does in the building. So that's, and then your homeowner's dues are less. And so, yeah, I mean, and I think, this all of the stuff with the virus, obviously, it will change things fundamentally. But once we have a vaccine, everyone will feel maybe a little bit safer in going out and doing the things that we've always loved doing before. And it might just, create some different behavioral, changes. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, if less people get the flu every year, that I'd be happy with that, right? I don't want it. I definitely am washing my hands. I mean, can we talk about that for a second? We joke here at home about how, like, in a typical day, right, or like on the weekend, you might I would go get a workout in on Saturday, and I would definitely wash my hands after a workout, right? But then you go from the workout to your car, and then maybe you might go fill up gas, right? So you go fill up at the gas station, and even though I'm a little bit of a germaphobe in the kitchen, like, I wouldn't necessarily use hand sanitizer every time I filled up gas.
Yeah.
And then you go to the grocery store, and then you come back. I mean, it's like, it I guess doesn't surprise you why we were getting sick often.
Yeah.
And
We touch everything.
right. Or a better example, kind of, I guess consistent with our conversation, is like, you go into these, let's say a brand new condo was listed, right? And we have 30, 40 people through in one weekend. Well, how many drawers have we all touched in the refrigerator and everything? And so you just kind of, I don't know, you look at that a little bit differently. It'll certainly make us change the way that we are habitually cleaning and disinfecting. And, but anyway.
Well, for us too, but I think also for the buyers or the renters out there, how often or how many properties maybe that they're viewing, how they're viewing them. Our agents previewing before to make sure, so the agents going in and looking at the property before and doing a lot more previews than we were before. So
Right.
I think that will change that behavior too. So you had a big announcement this morning that I would love to talk about it.
Well, thanks, Ash. Yeah, it's pretty wild. Yeah, it was a busy morning. So I announced today that 18 years of a career so far, and 15 years at Windermere, I'm internally grateful for that company. It's an incredible company. Obviously, a lot of our colleagues and friends and stuff work there. But yeah, I switched gears, and I'm going to join Compass in Seattle, which is kind of fun. And these guys, it's pretty exciting. We have lots of friends there, obviously, and respect them and admire some of those guys. And this is a group that I've been talking to for a couple years, and So anyway, it seemed kind of like a good time for me, and it kind of aligned with some other stuff personally and professionally that made it feel like a good time to make the switch. And so yeah, that's kind of had the entirety of my morning today before we jumped on. That might be why I was struggling so mightily getting on our live was,
Oh, yeah,
kind
good.
of getting everything updated, getting things posted, and
Yep.
it's a balance though, Ash, right? It's like you spend that much time with somebody and with a company that you admire, and your entrance into the new company is no more important than your exit from
The
your
other way.
former
Yeah.
company, right? And so I really respect them, and try to handle that professionally. And so we did get a press release out, which is kind of fun, and got the blog post updated. But and I'm really excited. But yeah, that was kind of fun.
That's
Thanks
good.
for asking.
Good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I'm so excited for you. I think that'll be great.
yeah.
And it's such
Thank
an
you.
I think what people, I guess, as you transition out to, it's such an undertaking. It takes a lot of courage, number one, but then also the headspace to go through the motions of doing that. And then, you have to think about all the details. And I mean,
Uh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. Check in with me in about a week, and you'll see. Not to mention, I mean, you probably think my hair is crazy. It is crazy. It's long.
My hair
I'm
is
getting.
crazy.
I mean, I haven't had a haircut for about like 2.5 months. 2 months. But anyway, you check in with me in a week, and I'll have more gray hair. Right? There's
Yeah.
like transferring files and getting everything to a new office space and all that stuff. But no, I'm excited, and in some of our um, great friends, people at our breakfast club that we both
Yeah.
participate in once a month. I'll be excited to see all those guys and celebrate a little bit. But I think it's funny. It seemed like a weird time to be going through this transition with everything else.
Yeah.
Anything that we do kind of professionally, I find myself asking myself almost once a day. I'm like, okay, well, is this selfish in this environment? But some things are destined to change and have to keep moving, and so that was one of them. So it's pretty exciting.
Cool. Well, up and away.
Yeah. So okay, so I thought about our call today, and I thought it'd be fun to, everyone knows that you and your husband Mark, you live at a Scala. Okay, so for those that aren't aware, Scala is definitely in my top 10 buildings downtown, right? I would want to know, and maybe some of the folks that are watching might want to know what you like about the building you're in, and then maybe, I kind of thought it'd be fun to hear 3 or 4 of your other favorite buildings in the city.
Nice. Well, we've been here since 2012, and I think what makes our situation a little unique, I mean, obviously we love the building. We think the location's amazing. The staff, Columbia Hospitalities, does such a good job just maintaining the
Yeah,
building, and we entertain a lot too, so we use those amenity spaces like the dining room and the kitchen and all that stuff. It's just the way it's designed is you won't see it. Also, the private vestibules or the foyers,
yeah,
I think you just don't see that either, and it creates a little
it's
bit more of like
beautiful.
a
Yeah,
private home kind of. So, but again, going back to kind of what's unique, my in-laws live in the building, my brother-in-law lives in the building, our good friends, their parents live in the building. So we have a little bit of a really solid community, and not to mention
yeah,
all the people that, have already lived here and, we socialize with on a daily.
yeah.
But it's our home.
It's a
So
family affair. I mean,
it's a
truly.
family affair for
But
sure.
you guys, it's kind of important to speak to that a little bit, because the whole idea sometimes when we're helping people understand their options, what building to go to and why, part of it is like the community that you're joining, right? Now you happen to have your inner community kind of, surround you and be
Really is.
surrounded
Yeah.
by in the same building, but which is really special. But that's kind of part of the amazing thing about living um, in a high rise, right? Because
Yeah.
you kind of get this sense of community where you see the neighbors only when you want to, not all the time. Like your building in particular, in fact, very rare in the city. You guys kind of have these private elevators that go up to your vestibule that gets you inside your unit directly from the garage, which is kind of cool. So you literally bypass other floors just to your floor, and then it kind of opens up to either your unit or you may share a vestibule, right?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So that's kind of fun. It makes it
Yep.
unique.
Yep. I mean, you
So
basically,
then,
our front door is open all the time. Well,
yeah,
we sleep with it shut, but otherwise, if you walk off the elevator, you're just basically walking right into our entry. So,
yeah, I've always thought that was cool. And I know that's
yeah.
always kind of a focal point for people. You know, it's a great building if someone wants some privacy and wants,
Yep.
you know, it'd be interesting to see if we see that again. I mean, I know when Midby built it, you know, it was
Mm-hmm.
a pretty significant expense. And part of that is doing like five dedicated
Five.
elevator shafts, right? Because of
Yep.
the, but it is very interesting the way that it was designed. So a lot of your space that's typically given to hallways and corridors is then where you deal with trash, and it's kind of private and it's not necessarily a focal point. And then you get that element of true privacy from the garage to the unit. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, so what are some of your other favorites?
I'm gonna have to ask you the same question. We'll see if our
Yes,
list.
I bet we do. Yeah.
So, you know, there's certain buildings built in certain decades that I guess you kind of have to go through, and the ones that you appreciate. Like I was thinking, Seattle Heights is actually one of my favorite
Yeah,
buildings of its time.
sure.
You know, and I think the reason is just so well maintained, and there's been, you know, the entry, they had the amenities, they have a great location, you know, being on Second Avenue, kind of more in the North Belltown
Yeah,
area. So I think that's kind of an oldie and goodie for me.
I love that.
Um, I think
I wouldn't say I'm
for,
surprised by that, but I mean, maybe a little, you know.
yeah,
I love it though. It's a great building.
it's a
Yeah,
great building. Well, every building has its own thing going for it,
totally,
right? So
totally.
like Continental Place has the gorgeous views that you can't find anywhere, right?
Yeah, yeah. And some of the units that get redone are so cool. You
Have
know,
you seen,
exposed concrete and
totally, have you seen anyone that had, they used to have blenders uh, on the countertops? Have you seen that?
you know what? I don't know. I mean, truth be told, I think I've sold maybe 4 or 5 units in the building over the years, and I do have a dear friend that lives there, but I don't know if I remember that. If I remember seeing
Yeah.
one. I mean, clearly I would have. If I've seen one, I would have remembered it, right?
To me, that's
Uh,
like the party buildings. So back in the day,
yeah.
like, because they all of them had pretty much like wet bars, right, in the living rooms and in the one bedrooms. And then they had these blenders in the countertops, and then they had these toast. There was a couple that had toasters that popped out of the side, the backsplash. I just think it's so funny. But that's a building that maintains its values just because of the
Yeah.
views, right?
Yeah. And,
Um,
you know, killer location too, right?
yep.
Super close to the waterfront. And, you know, buildings like that, I think, are going to benefit so much from the waterfront redevelopment, you know, and it's still just, it's proof that a really well constructed building can be a staple in the city for a long time, right?
Yep. If it's ran
Yeah.
well and kept up, people living there care about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
Well,
of course, go ahead.
no, go ahead. No, I was just
I was
gonna,
gonna speak to the new stuff that's out there too. I
yeah,
mean, you
yeah,
gotta
yeah.
love
Yeah.
Cristala. You gotta love, you know, I live 2200. I think is a great building because it pioneered by itself for a long time. You know, there.
Yeah.
But yeah, how about you?
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, it doesn't surprise me that, you know, we like a lot of the same stuff. I mean, I think there's reasons why certain buildings stand out for us too, right? Like 2200 as an example, or Enzo. You know, I
Yep.
always, like for a long time, you know, 6, 8 years ago, we kind of knew that that would be like the new kind of epicenter of downtown, right? Because you just knew about all of the growth. And then I think some of it we didn't know how, you know, just how crazy Amazon would expand. But I love that idea because you're right there. Like I've always really enjoyed Enzo because you come out of your door there and you're at the light rail and
Whole
or you know
Foods.
the South Lake Union Transit.
Yep.
You could walk over. I would love the idea at 2200 Westlake where you could come down in your pajamas if you wanted and go to Whole Foods or whatever, or get. It was sad when the Starbucks left there, but there's a lot of great local coffee around still.
Yeah,
So
there's monorail is just right around the corner, and there's a
yeah,
whole bunch of good spots.
one building that always stands out for me, and you know I sell in it pretty actively, but I've always loved it, is Madison Tower. You know, I think
Oh
Madison
yeah.
Tower is kind
Yeah.
of one of those staples. You know, I've had a lot of great um, clients in there over the years, but I've always liked that idea of, you know, a condo hotel, which we only really have 5 of between Seattle and
Mhm.
Bellevue, right? 4 or 5. I always like the idea of being able to have your own kind of private entrance, separate space, but it doesn't feel too stuffy or ostentatious, you know, like that seemed always kind of, I
No,
know that yeah, Yeah. And the people that live there love it because they, get to know the hotel staff and have extra amenities that you might not have in another building. Yeah. And then, I like some of the other staples too. I love your building. I really do. I've kind of fallen back in love over the last 5 or 6 years of Pioneer Square again too. Just kind of those industrial lofts and some of that cool space that we don't have enough of. You see that um, obviously all the time in New York and Boston and DC, but it's too bad we don't have a little bit more of that kind of industrial space.
Yeah,
But
because you had a
yeah,
couple big ones at the Third Avenue Lofts. Is that right?
yeah,
Yeah, I
yeah,
remember that
yeah,
one.
yeah. And you know
Yeah.
what? It's interesting. It doesn't surprise me at all. The two buyers in that building for those units were New Yorkers. They
Oh,
were they were the same crowd that loved and bought into Tribeca, and
mm,
just kind of like everyone. It's funny. It's a universal word that's used in Pioneer Square. Grit, right? They like the grit and
yeah.
kind of that feeling of like that I don't it's not a feeling of being unsafe. It's just there's an edge. It's just like why people love Cap Hill too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just love, I don't know. There's something cool about 120-year-old original hardwood floors and timber beam ceilings. And it sounds kind of goofy, but like, when people say they don't make them like they used to, they don't,
They
right? I
don't.
mean, so yeah,
But I think Pioneers, we as a city don't have a lot of that housing here. Like that, the
yeah,
traditional loft. I mean, you are very limited to the buildings down there that you could basically live in, right?
yeah,
If you want
yeah,
that old world character, that charm, um, you just, you know, don't have it. But with Pioneer Square kind of turning over, um, right now it's it's pretty shut down. We do a lot of running around the city, and whenever we get down there, I'm always like, oh. And we used to live actually at the Terry Denny Lofts down there for a while,
oh, okay, yeah.
and that
I
was a
didn't know
gorgeous
that.
building too. I mean, I'd love to see that converted.
That's fun. I didn't know that.
Yeah, we lived there right before we got married, and it was just a fun time to live down there. And again, it speaks to like the character, the history, like all that.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I appreciate that too.
yeah. Kind of. I don't know. Has it hit you recently? With some of these restaurant closings and stuff, and coffee shops that are struggling, that don't have the same volume.
Yeah.
Like we're gonna have hopefully like this resurgence, and like the people that survive. Like I noticed that Corville Pasta and
Hmm.
some others, are shutting their doors, and so to me, it's crazy, but it could open up the door for something else fantastic, right? So, I think some of the restaurants that have been staples will just have to carry the weight for some of the ones that didn't make it, and then
Yeah,
we'll just see what that turns into, right? New opportunities for new restaurateurs, and Seattle will get back on its feet, right?
I agree. Yeah, I mean we're nimble, we're small and nimble. Is
Yeah,
kind of what I think. And even when they call it the Great Recession, right? And I
yeah,
really
yeah,
actually didn't really hear that term ever as much as I've heard it obviously recently, but I feel like it just got that name, the Great
yeah,
Recession.
yeah,
And I feel like we bounced quicker than anyone
yeah,
else, and I think we could still do that, here in Seattle for sure. And we just have so many major players with the different companies in our backyard. And yes, it is sad that they're not coming back to their campus, quite soon enough, and they're, letting
yeah,
employees work from home. But that's all, it's safety, right?
yeah,
But they're
yeah,
still here, and so we as a city should be supporting them,
totally.
and letting them do their thing. Um, I don't. Did you know that Amazon was doing grants for the small businesses around?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
isn't that cool?
well, I think it's amazing, and they announced it pretty early on in the
Yeah,
process. I remember it might have been even back in like mid to late March. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you'll be okay with this. Like I try to avoid any discussion about politics.
yeah,
However, I do feel like standing up for Amazon every once in a while because, in my opinion, as someone that's downtown in normal circumstances almost every day, I see that as much bad press that they get, they should be getting a lot more good press. And a lot of the friends that I have not that work there even, but like friends in the commercial real estate business that, you know, are part of like seeing the impact that they've made on our city in good ways. You know, like a lot of people don't understand when Amazon does a new tower and they're effectively required to improve the area around that tower, right? So they put in, you know, extended sidewalks or little areas like where you'll see tables and chairs and parks and breezeways and whatever, you know, and they just they're giving a lot more than I think we all see. And I think they've been very good stewards to our city. And I despise the targeting of them all the time because you know what, if they you know don't feel at home in Seattle, it hurts all of us. You know, it's Bellevue and Seattle should be one and the same, right? We don't always look at both markets as the same, but in theory they are. So for us to really function, I think, and be wildly successful, we should find that balance between, you know, everyone's doing their fair share, but also being rewarded for the wonderful things that they're doing too, like helping small business.
Yep, I agree 100%.
Yeah.
I think that they don't get enough credit for what they have been doing, the areas that they haven't. I mean, actually, the business that they've drawn also into the city, small businesses, restaurants, you know, because of their campus here too. I mean, that has a direct benefit to our economy as a whole here in Seattle.
You're absolutely right.
You know, I think that I'm not going to say, I was hoping you were going to say it, so I wouldn't have to, but there is one council member that I just can't, like, I just have a hard time relating to the motive that's behind her movement, I guess.
Yeah, no. So thank you. But I'll just jump there. You know, I'll just agree, and we can leave that person nameless, but I'll agree. Yeah. And yeah, you know what? It only takes for anyone, and I assume some of the folks that are kind of queuing in today are friends and colleagues and strangers or whatever. You know, people aren't foreign to downtown, but like when we're downtown in between appointments or something, and you go into a coffee shop and you see all of like the construction gear, you know, you'll see the construction guys wearing their fluorescents and stuff and hard hats or whatever. And you see kind of like Noah's Bagel or Einstein's Bagels, you know, down there at 2200 Westlake, you know, or whatever, the lunch hour, you know, the food trucks. Like it's not an accident that the city's been so full of life, right? You know, all of this development, many of which has been Amazon, has a huge impact, you know? And for us, it makes it safer. You know, there's more people, there's, you know, more development, there's more, again, street improvements. And so, yeah. Well, I'm glad to hear we're on the same page. That doesn't surprise me.
Is there anyone that is out there that has any questions for us at all?
Yeah.
We're happy to take questions. I think what we'll probably do, maybe we'll end by a little bit before 10. Or give it a couple more minutes, and then we should just get on a regular schedule of doing these, maybe monthly to start, and maybe we'll have a couple topics or something.
I think it's great, and I think it'd be fun. You know, we had a lot of really great friends and colleagues and stuff show up here, which is great. And yeah, I noticed we even had a few clients on here, which is fun. Yeah, I mean, it'd be great to hear from anybody that had topics that they'd like to hear us debate and discuss, and you know, kind of in some of these future talks. And I love it. I mean, you don't have to ask me twice. You're as I mentioned in that blog post yesterday, you're a great friend. I don't know if you think of me the same. I mean,
I think you're just the nicest guy ever. I just think that you bring, I mean, I'm so happy you're in this world.
Wow. I'm gonna have a good weekend. I'm gonna have a good Friday. Thank you. No. I mean, I just think if this in any way benefits the people that read the blog or follow us on social or whatever, or it's just kind of a fun way to catch up, or for people to kind of see us chat about the market a little bit, I would be totally open to making it a regular thing. So we'll, if anyone has anything that they want us to, so Roy did have a question. Do you see that? Yeah, I can see where he's going with that one. No, that's good. What do you think, Ash? You want to take it, or you want me to take it?
I mean, go ahead and take it.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Roy is a good friend and a colleague of ours, and he brings up a really fair point. Now, you and I will be extra careful. So in a nutshell, the Seattle Times had an article either yesterday or the day before. And I don't want to get into the person that wrote it because I actually know her, and that's besides the point. But it was kind of an interesting angle on kind of positioning a news story on something that we don't really feel exists. And so the moral of the story was they kind of used some facts that are outside of our city. Like they used an example of someone that lived on Vashon Island to draw on comparisons to what's happening here in Seattle. And so the challenge, and I think Roy and Moya and a few other people brought it up, very intelligently, is that, real estate is so hyper local, as you know, we can't even compare downtown Seattle sometimes to Queen Anne or to Wallingford or to Capitol Hill, right? And so Roy's point and Moya's point is that Moya that works in Bellevue as an example, you can't compare West Bellevue that has a median sales price of 1.7 million to where Roy works a lot up on the Sammamish Plateau. And so those markets operate so perfectly different, it's so hyper local in our industry that you can't paint real estate with a broad brush. And we're seeing a very active market, which can be frustrating when you represent buyers because you're competing against 4 or 5 other offers, right? When the article kind of insinuated that, the market isn't what we're experiencing. And so it sends a mixed message.
Yep. Agreed. And I do think sometimes, and even when I see rental articles come out and knowing a little bit more about that market too, that sometimes data is behind. Yeah. And the headlines and the things that, different reporters choose to pick up on, might be 2 weeks behind, and timing is everything, right? And so that's actually not what's going on right now. And every month I will tell you in the rental market, it's different. And that's just, and even in our market, I mean, different weekends are different because of holidays and whether the weather is nice or if there's a, sports game or whatever, right? It just throws things off. It's unpredictable, but
it's too. A great example is like when we have little windows of opportunity that in a really competitive market, sometimes you'll get these little windows of opportunity, like for instance, midwinter break, when families leave Seattle and take their kids out to skiing or go up to Whistler or whatever, there's these little windows where there's less people vying for the same homes, and that's a week to week thing, where so our market, to your point, is every day is different, every month for sure. And then I think a really good example that's real time. Ever since I was a kid, I kind of got into like being a market follower, so I look at the financial markets and follow the stock market pretty closely. And everyone is like pulling their hair out because we have over 20 million people that have lost their job, which is so sad, and it's real and it's crazy. But the market, which it often does, has been going higher. There was a moment where we lost the most that we've ever lost in a 1 month period. It was like 32% from what they call peak to trough, right? And then from there it built back up. Well, right now it's just marching along like nothing is wrong at all. And that's a good reminder that the financial markets often look ahead, just like our real estate markets do. So our real estate market might not be looking at the last 30 days, it's looking at 60 to 90 days ahead. When we know that the long-term picture of our market is very good and very rosy, this is a blip, in that. But if you're just thinking about buying for the next 30 days, you're not really talking about a 30-year fixed loan and, a long-term investment. So it's a good reminder that, to your point, that all of these markets often look ahead, not where we are, but where we're going. Yeah.
For sure. Yes. Speaking of that, going into May, June, we're in May now, but later this month, as we get through the stay-at-home orders, I'm sure we're going to see a lot more inventory come on. I mean, we feel it every week, but it hasn't quite opened up because I think people are still, sellers are probably leery about putting their homes on the market if they're living there and all that sort of thing. So you agree? You feel like
well,
inventory?
I do. I do. It's interesting though. I mean, I think the biggest catalyst for that, as we know, is if you're an owner and you have this beautiful house that you've shared a life with your family, during COVID, you couldn't necessarily just open it up and invite a bunch of strangers in that might then bring the infection to your house, right? So inherently, the very first decision you make, and I've made that with a number of clients, is like, okay, let's wait. And we'll just go once the stay-at-home order is lifted, or we know a little bit more about the virus or how to protect ourselves or whatever. So I think there's that portion of the inventory that comes on for sure. I agree. And then, I think fundamentally, because there's been such limited inventory and so much demand, it's kind of it. I said early on, it's almost like we're going to feel like we're trapped in time. Like when COVID started, it'll look very similar when COVID ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or at least like when that 90-day period ends, we're going to go back to kind of what we had before, and then it's just a matter of, can people get the loans that they need in order to purchase, and will there be as much demand? And I'd say with all of the job losses, we have to acknowledge that the market's going to, demand could subside, at least, on kind of that lower end of the market.
Yeah.
And that affects then move up buyers, where someone's trying to sell a $600,000 place to buy $1.2 million. And so, I do think we'll see an uptick in inventory, but the true test, I think, for us will be when we look back in maybe August or September, is how much demand did we have, and did that keep the inventory low? Well, we have the election too, right? So that's often a catalyst for an inventory spike. Everyone that's trying to get their home on the market and sold before the election, which tends to be a little choppy. So yeah.
With that though too, those people have to go somewhere, right?
Right.
And so with uncertainty of maybe employment, or maybe higher values, or just uncertainty in general, maybe people will see a lot stay put. Just like, I'm gonna wait out this year. I don't think that we're gonna sell this year. I'm gonna rent this year, or whatever. So we might actually see, yes, a spike in inventory, but just enough for it to actually be absorbed, and for our prices to maintain solid, maybe go up a little bit. I know that the numbers came out for the MLS yesterday, the day before, and prices were up, or values were up overall. Despite down, and that's basic economics, right? Where you have the drop in the inventory and the demand is still there. And so that's why, prices it's crazy out there, just in terms of, the offer review periods and stuff that are going on.
Yeah. You've probably heard the stories down in Pierce County. I'll make this quick, but like Pierce County's great. It's on fire. Yeah. I mean, it's like they're at like a decade low, in inventory. And so, it'll be interesting, Ash. I mean, I think maybe kind of to sum up my analysis on that whole thing, it's like, if you're someone that's willing to make a purchase of let's say it's your budget $750 to $1 million, and this is a place that you intend on living in for at least 3 to 4 years in a place like Seattle, that investment is just so fundamentally sound. Unless we saw a complete reversal, of labor, wage, an exodus, in kind of our corporate culture, I just don't see it. And when you talk to people like from the Bay Area, some of these new colleagues now from Compass that I've connected with, the Bay Area is when you look at like Palo Alto, their average price per unit is like $2.1 million, and San Francisco is like well over $1.4 million. So we're still median across the board, right? So it's like we're still discounted, so we'll see. Anyway.
Good. Well, I think we're hitting our hour mark here, so we probably should jump off, but I know we could talk probably for hours.
Yes, we could, for sure.
Good.
For sure.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.